Hello and welcome. This video is presented to help General Conference delegates, conference superintendents, Episcopal nominees, and the general membership of the Global Methodist Church to visualize and to better understand the 2026 Episcopal nomination and election process. Along the side are 7 major categories of people. The steps in the blue portion of the graphic represent those steps leading up to the 2026 General Conference, while the purple section represents the time during the 2026 General Conference. The visual is divided into 7 main groups of people, which appear on the left side. For ease of reading during this discussion, I've rotated them to the top of the slide. Starting with the center group, we have the Global Episcopacy Committee, whose makeup and responsibilities are outlined in paragraph 605 of the Book of Doctrines and Discipline. This group is composed of 6 clergy and 6 laity elected at the 2024 convening General Conference. 2 additional clergy have been appointed to the Global Episcopacy Committee by the Connectional Council. Next, let's move to the group on the far right, the annual conference delegations. These are the clergy and laity general conference delegates that each annual conference is electing. These delegates together form an annual conference delegation with certain responsibilities in the Episcopal nomination and election process. One such responsibility is to elect 1 clergy and 1 laity to serve on the Area Episcopacy Committee. Each Area Episcopacy Committee will be comprised of the laity and clergy elected from the annual conferences that will become an Episcopal area during the Episcopal nomination and election process. The Area Episcopacy Committee allows the annual conferences to have more input into the election process, including which bishops should serve their Episcopal area. While the Book of Doctrines and Discipline refers to this committee, additional legislation will be submitted in 2026 to help clarify and flesh out its role and responsibilities. The 4 remaining groups encompass the nominees to the episcopacy, potentially including the current bishops as well as new nominees from the annual conference delegations. The full-time bishops include Bishops Scott Jones and Mark Webb. The 2024 Book of Doctrines and Discipline contains language that calls Bishop Jones and Webb out specifically should they wish to seek another term. This language will no longer be needed after the 2026 General Conference. The interim bishops include Bishops John Pina Alta, Kimba Evariste, Jeff Greenway, Leah Gregory, Kenneth Livingston, and Carolyn Moore. The 2024 Book of Doctrines and Discipline contains language that allows some of these bishops to seek another term. I'll come back to this a little bit later in the presentation. We currently have 1 transferred bishop, Bishop Edward Kigai. The 2024 Book of Doctrines and Discipline allows Bishop Kigai to seek another term if he so desires. The final group of nominees are those not currently serving as bishops, but who will be nominated by the annual conference delegations. Now that you have a basic understanding of the different groups involved in the process, let's take a look at the nomination and election process itself and walk through the various steps. Each of the annual conferences should be in the process of electing their 2026 General Conference delegates, as those annual conference delegations will have responsibilities early in 2026 as part of the Episcopal nomination process. As we enter into 2026, the total number of annual conferences, as well as the number of General Conference delegates allotted to each of those annual conferences, will be finalized. Early in 2026, the Global Episcopacy Committee will recommend the number of Episcopal areas and thus the number of bishops to be elected at the 2026 General Conference, as described in paragraph 604.3. The Book of Doctrines and Discipline guidelines suggest each Episcopal area be composed of 6 to 8 annual conferences. The Global Episcopacy Committee will also poll the current bishops to determine which bishops would like to be considered for a second term. Paragraph 604.8 allows Bishop Scott Jones and Bishop Mark Webb to stand for re-election at the 2026 General Conference. If they have not already made their intentions known to the Global Episcopacy Committee, Bishop Jones and Webb will be asked if they wish to seek re-election in 2026. The Global Episcopacy Committee will also poll Bishops John Pina Alta, Kimba Everest, Jeff Greenway, Leah Gregory, Kenneth Livingston, and Carolyn Moore to determine which interim bishops desire to seek re-election. Paragraph 604.8 also limits the number of interim bishops that can be re-elected at the 2026 General Conference. This limitation was put in place to ensure annual conferences which joined after the 2024 convening General Conference would be able to have a voice and a vote in determining their episcopal representation. It was designed to help prevent the monopolization of the episcopacy by the initial annual conferences, and to help ensure a truly global church, represented as such in its episcopal leadership. Originally, none of the interim bishops were going to be considered for re-election, but it was decided that this could potentially cause the GMC to lose out on some gifted bishops. Therefore, paragraph 604.8 allows 3 of the 6 interim bishops to be re-elected, and it requires that the interim bishops reach a 3/4 threshold of the voting delegates to be eligible to stand for re-election. A qualifying ballot will be held early in 2026 in the General Conference to determine which interim bishops will be eligible to stand for re-election. If more than 3 interim bishops reach that 3/4 threshold, the 3 bishops with the highest numbers of votes will advance to the general ballot. The transfer of bishops into the Global Methodist Church is governed by paragraph 611. The Global Episcopacy Committee will ask Bishop Keaguy if he wishes to seek election as a bishop for a 6-year term as allowed per paragraph 611.1. For those currently seeking re-election or election, background checks and supporting documentation as part of the information request will need to be submitted to the Global Episcopacy Committee as soon as possible, but no later than June 1st, 2026, in accordance with paragraph 604.1.alpha. Early in 2026, the annual conference delegations need to meet to perform three tasks. The annual conference delegation needs to create a ranked list of 10 other annual conferences with which they would like to share a bishop, and to submit that list to the Global Episcopacy Committee. These lists will be used by the Global Episcopacy Committee to provide an Episcopal area proposal to the plenary that will define the Episcopal areas. This plenary will be composed of one clergy and one laity from each annual conference. While the official deadline for this list is May 15, 2026, the Global Episcopacy Committee is requesting that it be submitted by March 15, 2026, if possible. Per paragraph 604.1.alpha, each annual conference delegation can nominate up to one clergy from their annual conference and one clergy from outside their annual conference to the episcopacy. While the official deadline for nominations is May 15, 2026, the GEC would also appreciate nominations by March 15, 2026, if possible. Once nominated, the Episcopal nominees, in cooperation with the annual conference delegation, should work to provide the nomination documents, background checks, and other supporting documents as requested in the information request to be submitted to the Global Episcopacy Committee in accordance with paragraph 604.1.alpha. Per paragraph 604.1.bravo, each annual conference delegation needs to elect one clergy and one laity to represent their annual conference on the Area Episcopacy Committee. Per paragraph 604.2, the Global Episcopacy Committee will compile and publish a list of all Episcopal nominees and bishops eligible to stand for re-election by June 1st, 2026. At this point, those elected to serve on the Area Episcopacy Committee are going to be busy. As early in June as practical, the plenary of those elected to the Area Episcopacy Committee will meet to define the Episcopal areas in accordance with paragraph 604.3. The Global Episcopacy Committee will provide an Episcopal area proposal to the plenary for consideration. The Global Episcopacy Chair will preside over this plenary. The active bishops and the members of the Global Episcopacy Committee may participate in the plenary with voice but not vote. Only the clergy and the laity elected by their annual conferences to the Area Episcopacy Committee may vote. The Global Episcopacy Committee originally assigned bishops so that no bishop served their own annual conference. Each bishop had at least one annual conference not on their continent, and, applicable only to the part-time bishops, no bishop served an annual conference in which they served as conference superintendent or pastor. By the formation and definition of the Episcopal areas, this plenary body will effectively make those assignments by nature of the way they define the Episcopal area. The Episcopal areas are approved by a simple majority of the plenary gathering of the Area Episcopacy Committees. As soon as possible after the plenary, the individual newly formed Episcopal area committees need to organize, convene, and elect their leadership in accordance with paragraph 604.4. A Global Episcopacy Committee member will preside over the Area Episcopacy Committee meeting until their officers are elected. Once the individual area episcopacy committees have organized, convened, and elected officers, they should conduct interviews with any of the Episcopal nominees and/or bishops seeking re-election that they desire. In June and July, the area episcopacy committees, the bishops, and the Episcopal nominees will be busy getting to know each other through the interview process. Per paragraph 604.4, each area episcopacy committee will produce a ranked list of up to 5 nominees that best match the leadership needs of their episcopal area. The area episcopacy committee will provide these lists to the Global Episcopacy Committee by July 20th, 2026. The Global Episcopacy Committee will then compile all of the ranked lists from the area episcopacy committees and provide those ranked lists to the General Conference delegates by July 31st, 2026. Once these ranked lists have been received from the area episcopacy committees by the Global Episcopacy Committee and made available to the delegates, those Episcopal nominees or bishops seeking re-election in the top 5 on those ranked lists will be invited to sit for video interviews recorded and distributed by the Global Methodist Church Communications. Scheduling of these interviews will begin on July 31st, 2026 and should complete as early as possible in August. Once all interviews are complete, they will be released to the General Conference delegates for viewing by the Global Methodist Church Communications. This brings us to our 2026 General Conference in Johannesburg, South Africa. As mentioned previously, for the interim bishops, a qualifying ballot will be held near the beginning of the General Conference. Per the current Book of Doctrines and Discipline, paragraph 604.8, only 3 of the 6 interim bishops may advance to the general ballot. The annual conference delegates will vote for the interim bishops they wish to see continue serving another 6-year term as bishop. Interim bishops must obtain 3/4 of the votes of the General Conference delegates to move on to the general ballot. Depending on the will of the General Conference, none, 1, 2, or 3 of the interim bishops seeking re-election may progress to the general ballot. If more than 3 interim bishops are seeking re-election and meet the 3/4 threshold, the 3 interim bishops with the highest number of votes will progress to the general ballot. Per paragraph 604.5, the General Conference delegates will vote to elect 1 Episcopal nominee per Episcopal area. Episcopal nominees receiving greater than or equal to 60% support will be elected to the prospective Episcopal area. If a single nominee is the top choice for more than 1 Episcopal area, the Global Episcopacy Committee will issue guidance prior to the next ballot. Those elected to the office of bishop shall be consecrated at General Conference according to the historic manner. The actual term of service for newly elected bishops begins 60 days following the close of the General Conference, at which those bishops were consecrated unless otherwise determined by the General Conference. We hope that this video, this graphic, has given you a better understanding of the Episcopal nomination and election process. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact the Global Episcopacy Committee.